Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move. My name is Nicholas Zard. I am your host, and today we're talking to a good friend of ours. His name is A.G. Khan, and he is the owner of a company called Vehiqilla. And Vehiqilla is a cybersecurity company. Here's what's interesting about AJ before we let him introduce himself is that I met AJ roughly about 6 months ago, or a little over 6 months ago, and as somebody who has a background in IT, I like the way that he looks at cybersecurity as a whole or holistic view on cybersecurity. And AJ is very incremental in the moving away from just only seeing cybersecurity as an IT problem or an IT situation to a very multi-layered holistic view of what cybersecurity is. So AJ is very well versed when it comes to automotive, connected automotive, the world, and also when it comes to aviation, which means he's also perfect for what we're trying to do in the advanced air mobility industry. So without further ado, let's hear from AJ. So AJ, tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thanks for this opportunity. Nicholas, I've been in cyber for 20 plus years, and out of those 20 years, the last 14 have been here in Canada and USA. What I have been doing since 2010, I've worked in financial institutions, I've worked in retail, I've IT, telco, oil and gas. So I've worked in many different sectors as far as cybersecurity is concerned. But something which would interest your listeners, since about 2015, I worked more in the aviation and the automotive, the connected vehicle sector, and looked at the cybersecurity of that. And that is indeed a passion. I am also very passionate about cyber innovation. So looking at new areas of cyber and a new perspective of cyber rather than the traditional IT cybersecurity. And I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I'm very glad you said that because that's one of the things that I remember liking a lot about you when we met about 6 months ago at in Austin at the Move conference. Is I like your whole idea of how you understand the whole of cybersecurity, not just little parts and segments of cybersecurity. So tell us a little bit about this aviation and vehicle experience, and also well, what is cybersecurity? Let's start with something very simple for those of us who might have heard, maybe think that we understand it, and I'm sure it's like AI, right? A lot of different things under cybersecurity. So, what is cybersecurity?
So, first of all, I would like to say that cybersecurity should be looked at a value add to ensure that your business thrives and survives in this connected world of today. So, that's what cybersecurity is. It's all about making sure your business is successful. It's all about making sure that your operations remain in operations, and that you do not have a major cyber breach. And even if you do, you are able to handle that and you are able to come out of that in a relatively less impactful manner. So that's what cybersecurity is. Uh, on a side note, my wife is a holistic nutritionist. So if you think about nutrition, cybersecurity is about nutrition of the digital ecosystem. That's what cybersecurity is. So I'm not going into a technology definition. I'm basically just from a
Wow.
business point of view, you have to think of it as whether your organization is healthy and whether your technology
Wow.
systems are healthy. I think that probably answers your question better.
Oh, AJ, it does in so many ways because we actually are very much into healthy food. My wife is vegan. We do a lot of Ayurvedic medicine and things like that. So that for me hits home. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. But you're right. It is about the ecosystem. It is about our always connected life, and of course, all the many little Swiss cheese holes that we have, which is very important for us in the aviation world and everything. So, tell us about a little bit about how you view this whole thing, because one of the conversations that I liked about you is you didn't just geek out on one aspect of the industry. You one thing that really impressed me about you is you really had a good holistic, sorry to use that word again, but a whole holistic view of what the industry is. Tell me a little bit more about how you that makes you different from other experts in the industry.
Yeah, well, I think somehow in the last, I would say, 10 years or so, I've had pretty unique experiences and they have combined to form my perspective, which, as you say, is a holistic cybersecurity perspective for the fleet. And when I say a fleet, it could be a fleet of connected vehicles, car, buses, trucks, or it could be a fleet of drones, of eVTOLs, so anything which is connected and which has a fleet ecosystem. During the last 10 years, I've worked for one of North America's largest airport for
Yes.
enabling their cybersecurity profile. I've worked for one of the largest airlines in North America. I've worked with the automotive manufacturers and looked at their cybersecurity. So I have this unique perspective from a manufacturing perspective, from the airport operator's perspective, and also from the airline operator's perspective, which you would agree is pretty unique and which gives me that holistic perspective again. And when I say holistic, it means everything which is related to fleet operations. One of the issues which I have with how we perceive cybersecurity is we think of it as IT cybersecurity. That is okay as when we think of it in terms of, let's say, financial institutions or telcos. Think of a web server uh, for a banking application. It is in a data center somewhere protected by layers of cybersecurity. But when you think of a connected vehicle, it is moving from point A to point B, and it is
Yes.
interacting with different interfaces. There are so many attack vectors. So, how do you actually look at it from a fleet cyber perspective, and how do you ensure that there is cybersecurity uh, and there's good governance as far as the whole ecosystem is concerned?
Yeah, you're right. It's actually very interesting because it is spread out, right? There are a lot of entrances, like you said, a lot of back doors and everything. And also the most important part is, the human being. It's easy to fool a human to give their information or to share their profile. And of course, since now we use mostly two types of smartphones, which, of course, are not the most secure in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of entrances and everything. So tell us a little bit about your experience in the aviation world, because I think that so I used to be in IT. I used to have an IT company in the 90s and everything. I still use Linux at home. And I think that we've all gone from being a little naive to now we start to understand what's going on. And it's the same thing in aviation, and especially worse in aviation because new products come on, new services come on. Now they have to work with connection while they're in flight, connection when they're down, parking, and so a lot of these new doors are opening everywhere. How is the aviation world embracing cybersecurity? What is your experience there, or how do you see it happening?
So I would say that definitely there has been a very serious approach to enabling cybersecurity in the aviation world. There are lots of conversations and lots of best practices which are being implemented. But however, it is a very complex environment, and I think just to use the words I see in front of me, the ways we move are pretty complex. So think of how someone would go to from let's say I am traveling to um, I don't know, I'm from Toronto to Paris. So I get in Uber and I go to the airport in Toronto, and then I check in and I go by a plane to Paris. And in Paris, I get the train and I go to
Mm.
Rome. It's a long. I love going around Europe, so I'll take a long journey, and then I'm booked into a hotel, and so my data is flowing all over. My information is all over, and all of this information needs to be protected, and my privacy needs to be protected, as you just mentioned. It is easy to say this, but when we are seeing so many
Wow.
different integrations,
Yes.
so uh, you know the vehicle we are moving in from the home to the airport has its own technology, then it is transferred to the airport, and then from there to the airline, and then from there to the train. Uh, what are the systems we are interacting with? If I'm using my, I don't know, my credit card on one of these, how is that protected? How is my personal information protected? So there are a lot of moving parts, and one of the things which we have to look at, and you mentioned that just a moment back. So there's a lot of new technology, right? I mean, we are talking about cloud, we're talking about AI, we're talking about new apps which are always coming for different, like in the aviation sector or in some other sectors. So how do all these this technology, how is it all protected ultimately? And that's where cyber governance comes into play. And I think one of the things which from a cyber governance perspective, which we have to look at, is that cyber governance is not something where the cybersecurity professional just says no. It's how you make it happen in a secure manner. So that's what we are trying to do, and that's what we do normally.
So speaking of cyber governance, because you're right, from the moment that you are at home and you tap on your phone and you get a ride sharing, a hail riding company, to then you are in a different environment, then you get in the airport environment, then you get in the airplane, then you get to another country, different sovereign, state. Especially here in North America, we have very different privacy rules than they have in Europe. I know they're very tough in Europe. You spoke of Paris, and actually, that's a country that has very stringent privacy rules on their servers. So, how do you put all of this together? Because it always seems that the weakest point is your smartphone somewhere along the line, right? Or your key fob for your electric vehicle. How is this? Is there a thread in all of this that you can think of, sort of a low-hanging fruit that you need to tackle first, or is it just a series of case-per-case scenario?
It is a series of case per case scenarios, but
Hmm.
the weakest point is the human being. The human being
Unfortunately, yes.
So I'll give you the example of in connected vehicles. We're talking about autonomous vehicles or electric vehicles
Yeah.
or even traditional ICE vehicles. If it is connected, so if somehow it is connected, the question is, we as as owner operators, drivers of those vehicles, do we think cybersecurity when we drive those vehicles or sit on those vehicles? We don't,
Oh,
right? We think
no.
safety, but we don't think cybersecurity. So here's an example. You're going from point A to point B, and
Hmm.
the doors of the vehicles get locked. The vehicle speeds up, and you get a message on your infotainment screen that pay me so much in Bitcoin, otherwise I will crash the vehicle. So someone has taken over the vehicle, and
Yeah.
you don't know what to do next, right? I mean, and this scenario is possible as of today. I'll call it the ransomware 2.0 scenario. So the question becomes, what do you do next? Who do you call? I mean, and we are in such an early stage that we don't even have the proper protocols for managing something like this. But how does it happen? It happens because of one, maybe just like on our computers, on our cell phones, maybe we clicked on a phishing email, so we clicked on, or we
We've all
downloaded
done that.
something.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've all
But
done
imagine
that.
if you do that on your car, right? I mean, you now you can download apps on your vehicle. So if you
Yeah.
download a malicious app on your vehicle, someone can use that to take over.
Those
Uh,
free apps, by the way, that have a lot of things that come with it. There's no free lunch.
there never is free lunch. Yeah, so those are the kind of scenarios. But I'll I'll look at it from a much wider angle. I just mentioned a single vehicle, right? But if we are looking at a fleet, so a fleet of trucks, for example, or it could be a fleet of eVTOLs, drones, a fleet. So 1,000 of those. What if they are taken over? What if they're not
Mhm.
taken over, but what if there's a denial of service attack? So on our
Yep,
road, the trucks are stopped. Exactly.
exactly.
So this is a much bigger issue than an individual's, impact. Although that is very important, even from a health and safety perspective. But from our economy perspective, from our transportation system perspective, we really need to look at this, and we need to look at it from a much bigger perspective, and it's from a critical perspective that cybersecurity on transportation systems, how is it being managed? And again, I'll keep repeating it. It should be looked at from a different perspective than IT-centric perspective. It should be looked at from a
Yep.
fleet-centric perspective. So what are the assets which need to be protected? Uh, I think one of the things which becomes very important here is it's not only the vehicles themselves. So we can think about the vehicles, and the OEM, the manufacturer will secure that vehicle. There's a lot of work happening on that side also. For example, there's the ISO 21434 road vehicles engineering, cybersecurity engineering standard. And then in Europe, we have UNEC
Yes.
R155 and R156.
Yep.
But there is also the responsibility of the fleet owners, whether it is an airline, whether it is an organization which operates advanced air mobility assets, whether it is a trucking company or a municipality, whether it is a hospital which runs ambulances. So all of those assets need to be protected, and the ecosystem around that. For example, you might have EV charging stations, you might have data in the cloud, you might have third-party apps, so suppliers. Uh, this is a long answer to your question.
No.
All of that, and of course the cell phones and uh, the handheld devices. Uh,
Yep.
One thing just came to my mind. We are talking about key fobs. Why don't we have MFA to open our car doors, right? I mean, or
Yep.
start vehicles. That should be done.
I think you said it really well. I think we're sort of stuck in between this convenient society and how do you tighten up all the little back doors and everything. Also, another thing to take into consideration is, I mean, right now I'm recording on an Apple MacBook Pro, right? Even though it is a closed environment, there are backdoors, right? Government pressures to open this, security pressures to open that. I have an Android phone right here, even though I put it on silent, it's still listening to me, obviously, right? I have a Linux machine right here. Everything has backdoors, everything has security backdoors. So there's that balance between how do we mitigate the rightfully so, governments want to make sure that we're not planning anything nefarious or things like that. And how do we tighten up this whole thing? And so, how do we balance that convenience, that wonderful experience of being able to go, hey, I want to go from here to here. I don't care what I travel in, and my information has to be kept safe. That's the bigger problem at heart there. And I think this is where you come in very well because you do understand the whole actually the holistic view of cybersecurity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you put it right. I mean, everyone is a stakeholder in this one. Obviously, the
Mm.
government is a stakeholder. The manufacturers are a stakeholder. The fleet operators are a stakeholder. The owner operators, the drivers are a stakeholder. I mean, how we have to change our perspective and think about cybersecurity, because again, it's not about saying no, or it's not about saying that something should not, the convenience should not be there. It's about making sure that it is secure, and it's a time and effort, but it's a way of
Yep.
developing the ecosystem, and then operating it. So when you are purchasing vehicles, whether it's a car or it's a drone, or the question becomes, do we ask the OEM, the manufacturer, about what are the cybersecurity controls in that vehicle? uh, then when we are operating it, we have to look at, as you said, there might be some backdoors. Then, so where is the data flowing? What are the components? Is there any backend servers or something in the cloud which needs to be protected? We need to train the owner operators, the human beings.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
need to do cyber monitoring of the vehicle. So how do we know that a vehicle has been breached or hacked? Or maybe it's just a misconfiguration. So we have to do
Mhm.
real-time cyber monitoring of that. Then, of course, we have to have governance structure. So, how do we know
That's
that
true.
the whole ecosystem is secure? You have to have best practices, and you have to assess against them. So it's something which is in a very early stage, the way I see it. But the more these vehicles are deployed in our ecosystem, the more opportunity there is for malicious individuals to hack them. And when those things happen, then obviously we start looking at cybersecurity. But the way us cybersecurity professionals want this to happen is that we think of cybersecurity by design, and privacy by design, which doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
It does not happen because there's so many moving targets that we have to be cognizant of. The fact that you're right, it's easy to fool someone to, hey, I'll give you free lunch if you don't tell you what I'll do with your information, but all the way up to the government and everything. I'll tell you a story. In 2014, I was working with a startup, an EV manufacturer startup, and I was working with a cybersecurity guy who's really an interesting fellow. And one of the questions we were working on little groups, right? They were asking, should we use a key fob or should we use a cell phone? So they said, all right, well, let's use a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone right now. It's always on, so on and so forth. But the biggest problem that they had was, where do we actually store the information? And obviously, at one point, it became obvious that there should be some information stored globally, but of course, let's say I have that vehicle here. I go, let's say, to Europe right now. I rent the same type of vehicle, same company. I can still use my phone. However, my data over there should not come over here. So how much is stored locally? And it became so granular that it became obvious how many moving targets we had to think about in order to make something that was not only safer but something that would adapt to the changing times. And that's something that I'm sure you're very well aware of. And I think you said it really well. It's still maturing. It will continue to mature. And also, I guess another thing too, we need to remember, we'll never get there. Obviously, by definition, we can't get there because we have new services, we have new tools, we have new platforms. If today, Apple and Android are the predominant smartphone platforms, tomorrow might be a different day. You never know that. BlackBerry was on top of everything, 20, 10, 15 years ago. So there's all of that. So how easy or not easy is it to have something that can work, and how on top of it do you have to be? I can only imagine. I mean, your job, you never get bored or tired.
Yeah, well, I think that's what drives me. But I think one of the things which is here is, when we look at it uh, from a fleet perspective, um, there are a number of things which need to be looked at. And one of the things which we are working on is fleet SOCs, fleet security operation centers. So I
Mm.
think that is something which needs to be looked at by every organization, separate from their IT security operation centers, because you are managing the entire fleet. And right now, one of the challenges which is there is, and you mentioned that it's early days and there is a lot of things which are still developing. One of the things which is developing, which is still lacking, is the human expertise in this area. So
Mm.
IT cybersecurity folks, already there's a lack of IT cybersecurity expertise in the market, but fleet cyber, that's something which not many people have understood and not many people are focused on it. although it's a critical requirement. So one of the challenges in developing solutions and securing all these ecosystems is to get the correct people and for them to talk to the correct people. So interesting question becomes, if you are doing fleet cyber, do you go and talk to the operations, the individual who does
Ah,
operations of the vehicle, or do you go and talk to the CIO? Because the CIO wouldn't have the in-depth knowledge of the vehicle operations, but the vehicle operations guy doesn't have the in-depth knowledge of the IT systems, right? So,
wow.
so these challenges have to be overcome, and I think podcasts like yourselves are an opportunity for me to highlight this, and for people to think about this.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also that's the coherence within a company, within a fleet, within a group, within a bunch of partners to work together on making sure that, the right hand knows what the left hand is doing, that kind of stuff. So you're right. Up until now, we've lived in very almost segregated kind of business models or structures, business structures. But now it's important to include security in everything that we do. I'll tell you one of the biggest problems that we have right now in advanced air mobility, specifically designing the multi-ports, is the actual booking platform of all the things, right? I mean, everything else we more or less have, but the booking platform is the biggest challenge because we want to give you, AJ, the possibility to open up your phone and say, I'm right here. I want to go right there. I don't care how. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter whether it's a one-seater or an Airbus A380. I don't care. I just want to do this from that. Be billed once, not have to think about it, right? And I mean, at this moment, it's a huge challenge because we not only have to talk to lots of different companies, we have two platforms that we have to work with. We also have different carriers that will encrypt things very differently. It is a huge challenge. So maybe my question to you is, I'm a big proponent of open source software in general, and I know the philosophy open source. A lot of people, work on it and resolve the issues fairly quickly. Closed source, also a lot of pros and cons about that. Maybe a little bit tighter, but we don't really know what is happening. Maybe only a few thousand designers and software engineers are working on it. What's your take on all of that? Does open software have a chance to help advanced air mobility or any kind of advanced mobility in general, whether it's on the road, in water, in space, on rail, and in the air?
Yeah, well, I think that's always a discussion to be had. And from a cyber perspective, I would normally say that a closed source system is better, because obviously the vulnerabilities, and there's less chance of hacking
Mm,
into that. But on the other hand, the argument is that if it's an open source, then so many people have tried it that it becomes secure, right? So
right.
but the question becomes, so one of the issues which I've seen with open source is when it is used for advanced applications, what happens with updates? You know, if version updates are being properly handled, managed, and that usually becomes the responsibility uh, of the organization which is using that open source code, rather than the people who developed it. So that, I think, is a challenge, because if you are doing version updates and you have to look at it from a cyber perspective, but it can and should be done, but it's something which needs more effort from a cyber perspective, because obviously otherwise
Yeah.
the vendor is responsible for updates.
Yeah, I've looked at various situations, and I can use hardened Linux distributions to run on my computer. Even BSD would be fantastic and everything. And I'm almost now, as I'm 30 years of doing IT work, not as my main thing anymore. But I'm almost getting to the point where I think we need two devices, two computers, two laptops, two smartphones, one with very generic, run of the mill, whatever, only for communication, done deal. And then another one where you keep all the data on, and that is off limit, has a kill switch. and that's it. So I don't know. I
So,
mean, there's no easy answer around that one for sure.
so just to, I can't show it to you, but there's one computer, second, third, fourth, and here's my
Exactly. I know. It really gets to that point now where, but the important thing is where the data is, and that's the part that, I still have my hard drives right here at my feet actually, and they're off limit. There's a kill switch. I can take them out at any time. They're hot swappable, so on and so forth. It's so
Yeah, but
important to have that.
that's if you go back to the conversation about connected vehicles, any kind of connected vehicles, and you're going from
Mm.
point A to point B, where is your data being stored? So if you're
Yes,
going
and that's the
between
thing.
different countries, if you're going between different states, which jurisdiction is your data in, and what are the rules for that? And sometimes some jurisdictions, like you were talking about France. If someone goes from France to another jurisdiction which has not that stringent privacy controls, um, where is the data?
Yeah,
Does it go
where is
back?
the data?
Exactly. So, and that's my question when we think of these fleet ecosystems. We don't, right now when we deploy them, we don't have a data flow diagram, right? I mean, if we look at an advanced air mobility ecosystem, vertiports, do we know where specific data elements are going? So
Mm,
right now, I don't think we look at it from that perspective. And if we don't know that, then we don't know what are the controls which are required, what are the threats to each. Like,
right.
is there a threat analysis and risk assessment carried out for this ecosystem? Do we know what are the risks and what are the likelihood and impact for those risks? So all of those need to be looked at. And yes, it's a very complex and time consuming activity, but I think as we deploy more of these elements in our society, in our connected society, we have to look at it from a risk perspective, because the risk is huge, right? I mean,
Yes.
if I gave the example, if 1,000 vehicles are taken over, or if they are just denial of service attack, our transportation system will not operate. So we have to look at it from that. But the reason I keep emphasizing this thing is that we are not doing that right now. We are thinking of
Uh,
cybersecurity in terms of IT cybersecurity, and we just think, okay, we'll secure our data center. That is not how Fleet Cyber would
s-
operate.
no, no. And so, AJ, I just realized we're running out of time, which is a bad thing for this, but it's actually a good thing, which means, hey, you're going to have to come back. Sorry, you don't have a choice. Because I never even got to the questions as, why are you doing this and all of that, which will be for the next show. So tell us a little bit about where can we find more information. Of course, we'll have that on here, but where can we find more information about Vehiqilla? And next time we'll even ask you why did you come up with a name, but that's for next time.
For sure. And always happy to come back. You can see that I'm passionate about this subject and I just love to talk about it.
Indeed. Indeed.
My company name is Vehiqilla, as you see. So you can see, you can go to vehiqilla.com. That's the website. Or you could
Perfect.
go to YouTube. I have a channel called Vehi TV. So a lot of
Yep.
information there. And
We'll put it there.
I'm available on LinkedIn with the AJ Khan, KHAN. That's my LinkedIn. So happy to connect with anyone who wants more information.
Perfect. Thank you.